Hello everyone and welcome to this workshop. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic, but I consider little discussed. So before we start, I just want to remind you that you can take a look of agenda of today's workshop in your email. So let's get started. I wanted to start with some questions. You don't have to answer right now, just think about it and analyze your answers, and remember, just be honest with yourself. So, have you ever corrected any behavior that you consider inappropriate to your children with an insult or maybe a threat? Do you consider bad grades are enough reason to receive physical or verbal punishment? Do you think that violence is the best method of discipline, or that is a good way to form the character of children? Domestic violence is the topic of today's workshop, and domestic violence against children is a worldwide problem. It's considered to be any type of aggression, whether physical, verbal, or sexual, against children. And as adults, we often underestimate a child's potential to understand what is happening around them, and underestimate how much what they see, what they hear, and what they receive affect them, not only psychologically or emotionally, but also physically. The consequences of this violence can be, and indeed are, far-reaching in the lives and health of these children. And the consequences can be psychological, physical, and behavioral. So we are going to talk about these consequences so we can understand the importance of our behaviors, our words, and our actions in children's lives. So we're going to start with psychological consequences. Now, you may think that this kind of consequences are more related to verbal abuse, such as insults or threats, but no, in fact, these consequences can also develop with physical or sexual violence. What is actually a little bit more related to psychological consequences is the behavior of children. Children who are victims of domestic violence tend to present problems when socializing with other children, either because of fear or emotions of anger, and many children show signs of chronic stress and anxiety, which also makes it difficult for them to develop in a healthy manner. In a study conducted in Ecuador, more than 50% of mothers mentioned that they do not take any action when they witness psychological violence against their children, and 30% of mothers consider domestic violence as a discipline method. One important point here is that childhood is a stage of development and learning. Children at this stage not only develop skills but also behaviors. And abused children, or those who have witnessed physical, psychological, or sexual abuse, they tend to repeat the same behavioral standards unconsciously. Physical consequences can be caused by physical abuse, of course, and this type of violence is more related to certain type of injuries that affect biological development of children. For example, injuries can go from a bruise on the arm or any part of the body to an injury of the head that can affect the limbic system, for example, that is in charge of emotions, behavior, and personality, or maybe injuries at the bone level. Both physical and psychological, emotional and behavioral consequences affect overall health of children. I want to show you a short video, so we are going to talk about it in the next activity of the workshop.
Hey there, kiddo. Back again? That's a nasty case of gang violence you got there. They've been using you as a lookout again? Well, don't you worry. Take a drop of this on a cube of sugar, and it'll keep you safe, okay? And if anyone says otherwise, send them to me. Remember, take one drop on a cube of sugar. It worked for Teddy.
this is a very powerful video, and I really like what it says at the end. There's no vaccine for this. There's only you. Domestic violence against children, like many other problems, is preventable. But how to avoid these behaviors? How to avoid this violence? There are several ways to do it, but these ways may vary according to who the abuser is. Is it someone we know? Is it me? Someone in my family, maybe? Being able to recognize these patterns of violence is the key to these problems. If possible, denouncing the abuser and also therapy can help those who don't want to hurt their children or other children around them, and they can learn appropriate methods of discipline. According to a manual from UNICEF's End Violence campaign, there are 6 strategies that can help prevent violence against children. These strategies are: first, supporting parents, caregivers, and families. These strategies focus on supporting families to receive education on child development in order to learn good discipline methods and to avoid violence. Second, helping children and adolescents cope with risk and challenges. This helps children learn to be able to act when they confronted with violence without using it. Third, changing attitudes and social norms that foster violence and discrimination. This focuses on changing attitudes and social norms that hide violence. Fourth, promote and support services for children. This one is really important. This strategy encourages children to seek appropriate professional support when incidents of violence occur, and they actually help them to report these accidents of violence, and they help to better cope with these experiences. Enforce laws and policies to protect children. And 6, conduct data collection and research. This one is also very important, to acquire knowledge about violence, where it occurs, how it occurs, and which sectors of child population are most affected, in order to design and plan intervention strategies. To conclude, I just want to share a personal experience with you. My father was victim of domestic violence by his father. He told me that when he was playing in a square that was in front of his house when he was a child, when he heard his father whistling at them, him and his neighbors, when he heard just the whistling, he knew what is going to happen. When he got home, his father would tie him to a post and beat him with a whip. He told me that it was all he received that made him promise himself that he will never do the same when he became a father. He doesn't have many memories of his childhood, and I think that's possibly because of all the violence he received and he saw. Not all children, not all people have this kind of positive reaction of, I'm not going to do this. On the opposite, there are children who are victims of violence that they adopt this violence and they use it later in their adult life. But violence is preventable. Now I want to ask you a question. So, do you believe that shouting, insults, or hitting is the only violence that can be used against children? There are violent acts, yes, it is true, but child labor, poor nutrition, lack of cleanliness are also part of violence, are part of child abuse. So I would like to invite you to the next workshop we will give in next week on child abuse, where other important topics will be discussed. So let's go to the next activity, and thank you for listening.